Today we're going to hear from Bill Nager. Bill is a senior project manager at Bartlett and West with vast experience in mechanical, electrical, and plumbing projects. His talents have solved challenges for clients with buildings across a wide variety of types, including public, utilities, telecommunications, correctional, educational, industrial, office, and residential facilities. Today, he will be discussing how to reopen your building after being unoccupied for long periods of time and how HVAC systems can assist in reducing risk of undesirable airborne particles. Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Looks like we are a great crowd here today, a wide variety of different occupations, and that's great. I want to start off and kind of find out a little bit where all of you are at with a little survey here. So kind of tell me about what is the status of your work environment. Just first choice, you've continued to work at your typical office throughout the pandemic. Since the pandemic, maybe you've been working remotely at home, but plan to go back to the office environment pretty soon. Third choice there is been working remotely and feel uneasy about going back into the office. And we'll talk a little bit about that during our presentation today. And then the last choice, been working remotely at home and intend to continue to work from home for the foreseeable future. So if you can all respond to that, I'd appreciate that just to kind of see where everybody's at. So looks like several of you have worked, really haven't changed your working conditions throughout this time. So that's interesting. Okay. Okay, so kind of 50-50 about, for the most part, working through the pandemic the same and then working remotely at home. So let's go ahead and get started here. And I think maybe a good place to start is to talk about paths of transmission for the viruses, and particularly the COVID-19. There's really three primary paths. Direct contact, that's coming in just what it says, direct contact with the virus, whether that's through hugging or direct contact with a person who is infected with the virus, that sort of thing, or any other means through some sort of fluids or contact and that sort of thing. Another transmission path is through droplets. Somebody's saliva being on a glass or a plate or a utensil or something, and you come in contact with that, that's certainly a second choice. And then really there's the third option, which is really going to be where we're going to concentrate most of our conversation today, is airborne particles. Certainly if somebody's infected with the virus and they sneeze and that spray gets some of those particles in the air, can be transmitted through that way. And again, that'll be our primary focus today. So let's talk about some concerns, and certainly some of these questions would apply probably along with that survey that you took at the very beginning that indicated where you're at as far as working in your office environment. But some concerns as we get ready to go back into our normal office environments: are our buildings and manufacturing plants safe for our staff to reoccupy? Those buildings have been vacant or partially vacant during this time, and it's very natural to just wonder, are they safe to go back into? Another question might be, will our buildings be contaminated with the virus by people entering? That's certainly another concern. We've all been working at home, or a lot of us have been working at home throughout this, and going back into a new environment or office that we haven't been there for a few months, it's only natural to wonder if that space is going to be safe for us to go into. And along with that, are the buildings affected by partial or complete shutdown of the HVAC systems? If those buildings have been vacant for the last few months and building operators, building owners have shut systems down in order to save energy and just see what's going on, I mean, just wondering, are they safe going back into? And then kind of another question might be, can the HVAC systems actually be used to reduce the risk to our building and manufacturing environments for the virus? And if so, how? So, I mean, the answer to all these questions is yes or probably. And if everybody really follows what the CDC is saying as far as guidelines, our buildings are certainly going to be as safe as they can be, or at least the risk of contamination of a portion of the entire building can be limited. When people are ordered to remain at home and the buildings that were once full are now empty, it's only natural to feel some of these hesitancies and wondering what's going on. As I move forward through this presentation, I do want to clarify one thing. I'm going to be using the term building in a very broad sense. And that term building is going to include office buildings, higher education facilities, K-12 schools, manufacturing facilities, athletic facilities, and can probably apply to most any sort of building in existence. So just want to clarify that terminology a little bit as we move forward. So changes in building operations. When people are ordered to remain at home, like I said earlier, those buildings that were once full are now empty or maybe nearly empty. The reduced activities don't demand the HVAC systems to operate at or near capacity, which can reduce the ability for HVAC systems to circulate, ventilate, or even filter the air inside the building. The ability of those HVAC systems to operate and to ventilate and filter the indoor air are really keys to the HVAC systems being able to make our buildings safe and ready to be occupied in a safe fashion again. There's reduced maintenance in these buildings. I mean, the fewer people, the thought is that there's just fewer things that maybe could go wrong, or less dirt being and foreign objects being introduced to the facility. So our custodial services also are being reduced. All of that is going to affect or make us wonder, you know, are these buildings safe as we move back into it? One of the great sources for anything with indoor air conditions or indoor air quality is ASHRAE. The American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers has always been at the forefront of this area in their ASHRAE standard 62.1 for ventilation of acceptable indoor air quality. That's standard certainly touches everything that we're talking about here today with regard to the use of HVAC systems and potential use to keep our buildings safe. ASHRAE has also set up an epidemic task force to address some of these things. They have created some building readiness guidelines. They've even created an ASHRAE position document titled Infectious Aerosols, and also written an emergency issues brief as well. That information, coupled with their normal environmental health committee, they have created their own page within their website to provide COVID-19 response resources for you. That's all located at that website that I've got listed there at ashray.org/COVID-19. So a lot of great information. I would suggest that you take a look at that. It's going to get into more detail than what we have an opportunity to here today. But we'll touch on some of the topics that are included in that. So as we look towards these airborne particles and how can we reduce them to make our indoor environment safe, we're going to look at three different methods. The first one is cleaning surfaces. That's wiping surfaces of HVAC systems in addition to those countertops, wiping those countertop surfaces, the desk surfaces, and those sort of things. Dilution, very much just like it sounds, just trying to mix a lot of fresh and clean air to dilute any potential airborne particles that are not desirable within our atmosphere. And then removal, somehow, whether it's through filters or other means to extract those undesirable airborne particles from the air. And so let's look at each of these a little bit closer. Whenever I talk about cleaning and disinfecting surfaces, again, we're talking about how it applies to HVAC systems. We're talking about cleaning the interior surfaces of air handling unit and other parts of the air distribution system. And that you'll want to do that after you confirm that the equipment is operating properly and any necessary repairs are made, so you can clean any dirt particles that would be created through those processes as well. Look at the coil fins. Again, these units may have been sitting idle during the last few months if the building has been unoccupied, or at the very least running at a lower air volume than what might be normal. You get a chance for moisture to be retained on those coils and in the drain pans, and potential for some algae or other bacteria that may have grown, again, while people are not in there and maybe not checking things as often as they normally would. You want to look at the fans and the fan inlet cones and dampers and air blenders. There's edges where the airflow is going to hit and change direction, and then there's a natural tendency for dirt or lint and things to collect in those areas. Again, you want to clean those areas and keep those from being drawn into the airstream. Again, check, some of these are just regular checks, but maybe people haven't been in there to check them lately. Make sure the access doors and gaskets seal tight, so that you're not bringing in particles through those cracks and things of the system. And then clean leaves and debris near the outside air intake louvers. These louvers are often located in areaways and maybe kind of in the corners of buildings. And again, just need to go out there and check things and make sure that the outside air intake is not being blocked or have an opportunity to suck additional dirt and other items into it. Dilution. ASHRAE has some recommendations as to how to deal with bringing in outside air as you get your building started back up. They actually recommend flushing the building interior with as much as 100% outside air for a minimum of 2 hours prior to people occupying the building, and for a minimum of 2 hours after the people leave the building. So their recommendation is to flush, trying to get all that fresh air before the people enter, and then knowing that those people have an opportunity to bring in foreign particles whenever they come into the building, trying to flush that out as soon as those people leave the building. Now there's some things that you don't want to just go to your system and open it up to 100% outside air and bring all that raw outside air into the building. There's other concerns with that. Maybe a few weeks ago, whenever we were talking about outside air conditions of 60 to 70 degrees and low humidity, that would have been great air to bring in, whether it's through the HVAC systems or through open windows. This week, I know we've got temperatures reaching up in the 90s and high humidity. You don't want to just open your outside air and bring in all that high temperature, high humidity air, because it's very likely your air handling unit system can't handle that, can't treat that properly to bring it down to reasonable temperatures to supply to the building and bring down the relative humidity. And you may just be creating some additional problems through that humid air in your occupied space and mold and that sort of thing. So you'll certainly want to review that with a licensed professional engineer or someone who can properly evaluate your system to see what it's capable of handling as far as magnitude of outside air. Again, you don't want to try to implement a good thing as far as flushing the building, but creating another problem by bringing in outside air that is not conditioned and highly humid. You can also just increase the airflow of the system, possibly. Many buildings have variable air volume systems, which do kind of just what the name says. They whenever you aren't at full load, that you can use lower quantities of air to maintain the space conditions. And that's probably the way they've been operating. All the buildings have been partially or only partially or completely unoccupied. But you could possibly go in and change the controls on those systems such that you have a minimum setting that's higher than normal, just to get more air circulated through the space to again dilute that air with cleaner air that's been filtered, and just again you want to work through that with somebody very knowledgeable, such as a licensed professional engineer. Then we'll get into removal. I mentioned filtration a little bit there. Be sure to install clean air filters into your air handling unit equipment. Again, it's been 2 or 3 months since some of these buildings have been unoccupied or limited occupation. Maybe that was right as all the stay-at-home orders came in place. That was about the time that filters were supposed to be changed on your scheduled maintenance. And maybe they haven't been done, so you want to make sure that the air filters are clean. You may also increase the frequency of changing the filters. Cleaner air filters certainly work better than partially dirty air filters. Maybe you were on a schedule that air filters were changed twice a year. Maybe you could up that to every quarter, and if you were on a quarterly schedule, maybe change that to monthly and so forth. You may also consider installing a higher efficiency air filter. Maybe the air filters you were using before were MERV 7 filters. Maybe you can consider increasing to MERV 13 filters. Of course, the higher the number, the more efficient, and the smaller the particles that can be removed from the air. But again, you got to be careful with this as well. Those higher efficiency filters create more resistance on the fan, and you may actually be limiting or reducing your airflow by trying to make your fan work harder with those higher efficiency filters. Again, this is something that you probably want to have reviewed by someone with the knowledge, such as a licensed professional engineer, to check that out and make sure you're not creating more problems by putting in higher efficiency filters. Other options for consideration might be to install ultraviolet air purification equipment. And again, that's going to require some modifications to your air handling unit or your HVAC distribution systems. So you want to get somebody involved in that that can analyze that and make sure that you're not creating more problems as you attempt to make things better. Another option might be to provide temporary portable filtration units in areas of high occupancy and high traffic. Maybe you, at your manufacturing plant or your office, maybe you've got a front lobby or corridor that everybody walks through as they come in to start work. Maybe you install these temporary filtration units in those areas and kind of give those people an air wash as they walk in to have a chance of removing some foreign particles from their clothing, that sort of thing that may not be desirable in your building. That certainly, being a standalone system, wouldn't really have much effect on your existing HVAC system. So maybe there's a less opportunity to create a problem in your existing systems. So something to think about there. So we've talked through those three different areas, kind of what you can address. Let's talk about the steps as you ready your building for people to come back into it. First step is certainly to create a plan. Create a plan that considers these things that we've talked about, what you're going to, kind of a checklist and things that you want to consider looking at. From there, you'll want to communicate that plan to everybody. Certainly, you'll need to communicate that to the maintenance staff and those who you are asking to take particular actions to get the buildings ready for the people coming back. But you also want to communicate that plan to the occupants, the people that are coming in. That can help make them more comfortable to know that their building maintenance staff has considered things and are doing things to try to keep the environment safe. You might also, as you share that plan with them, it may allow them to help you implement that plan, such as maybe adjusting their work schedules to accommodate some of the additional maintenance that you might be implementing. Step 3 is to really assess and evaluate the HVAC systems, kind of a mini recommissioning process of sorts, where you're looking for unusual conditions in the HVAC equipment. That standing water that I talked about earlier in the drain pans, dirty surfaces, dirty filters, mold that maybe wasn't there whenever the building was vacated a couple months ago, but it is now. Just checking things out and seeing what's going on before you plan on bringing the people back into the building. You also want to, step 4 would be to determine if the systems are operable. Maybe a fan belt broke and maybe the fans in one of the air handling units isn't even working properly, and you didn't know that because nobody was in the building. Are the outdoor condenser coils clean, or did they get clogged up with leaves or grass clippings and that sort of thing? Do the cooling towers have standing water? Is there algae growth? Again, just kind of need to check in on these things in your equipment and see if everything's working properly, since maybe the maintenance and in operations was reduced over this last period of time. And then another thing that may not be immediately thought of, but are the maintenance parts readily available? If that fan belt is broken, is your normal source for parts or for clean filters, or is that supplier open right now? And if they are open and available, do they have the filters and everything that you need? Or is everybody else doing the same thing you're doing? And do you have a rush on filters like we had a rush on toilet paper a few months ago? So make sure that you can get the parts and get the supplies that you need to get your systems ready for the people coming back. And then after you get all that taken care of, again, cleaning the HVAC components, cleaning the inside of the units and other surfaces that are within the airstream. From there, you can explore the idea of the higher efficiency filters, operating the air handling units with those. But again, I want to warn you that you want to make sure you evaluate how that additional resistance might affect your air handling unit. Get somebody who's very knowledgeable as to how to deal with those situations, and make sure you're not creating a problem that you try to solve a different problem. And then increasing ventilation. Again, just increasing more outside air, but again, that's something that you need to be careful with so you don't bring in high humidity. And if any of you have allergies like I do right now, we've got a lot of allergens in our outside air right now, so you want to be careful there too. Again, don't want to create a situation that's humid and opportunity for mold growth, or bringing in those all that pollen and some things and creating a bigger problem than what you were trying to solve. And then again, touched on earlier, maybe you have an opportunity to utilize some temporary portable filtration equipment and just kind of see if that's necessary, or if that's an option that you can do that would be helpful and not have minimal, if any, effect on your existing system operation. And then from there, you should be set that hopefully you can gradually move into what's more standard equipment operation. Maybe you modify some of that equipment operation as well, that you, if your system can handle it, maybe you do some of that air flushing before and after your people are coming in, and you might modify what was your standard equipment operation before all of this happened. So I think within the time we've kind of touched on a lot of things. Like I said, there's a lot, many more additional resources out there listed up there on the screen. The CDC is certainly a great resource. The ASHRAE COVID-19 page is a great resource. They've got more information than I think anybody can really get through, but they've got you can find something that would apply to your system. And then ASPE, American Society of Plumbing Engineers, also has a coronavirus COVID-19 page that they have even more recommendations as to how to deal with this situation. I know I mentioned earlier, as far as people logged in, we've got a wide variety of occupations, engineers, architects, maintenance, facility staff. Certainly, there's some things that, as I look forward into the time coming, how will this pandemic affect the HVAC systems that we design today, and is it going to affect our design and how things are operated in the future? I think there's certainly an opportunity for that for all of this to affect that. What it is, to what extreme it is, I don't know. But I do think there's going to be some impact. Maybe not to the extent of what Legionella disease did several years ago, but you know, we just don't know yet. I think some of that will be determined by how we as professionals approach the situation, and then what building occupants start demanding and expecting from their building environments. I mean, will the buildings be designed differently in the future? You know, there was a time that everybody had private offices, and we've moved out to open offices, and those open office environments have moved to low partitions. I wonder how that will be affected, if there'll be times that people will demand private offices, or people will expect that the partitions between our workstations, maybe they get taller now instead of getting shorter, to help isolate uh, the workers from workers that are adjacent to them. So just, will the workplace be different? I'm curious, with all our different occupations out there, I'm wondering if any of you have some ideas how things might change, and what you might be seeing or hearing from your clients. Would anybody be willing to offer any ideas? You can type it in the chat box there, and we can maybe get other people's ideas from that. Okay. Well, nobody's willing to step out there right now, but we'll open that up. Please offer any ideas and share with the group. With that, we'll also open it up for any questions. If anybody has any additional questions they might have from want to explore some of the topics that we touched on.
Thank you, Bill. If you could mute there for our audio, that would be fabulous. At this point, we are going to open it up for questions you may have. As Bill mentioned earlier, you can go on and place your question or any ideas that you have, as we were just discussing in the chat box. It looks like a couple of you are typing there now. We'll wait a couple minutes for questions to come in. And as we're doing that, I do want to thank you again for sharing your time with us today. Thank you, Bill, for sharing your expertise with us. As a reminder, a recording will be available on our website at bartlettwest.com. Bill's contact information is posted here, and I would encourage you to also connect with him directly. Looks like we have a comment here. Bill, WSKF is reorganizing their space and raising partitions. So just as you were talking about, as we're looking at changing the workspace environment, that's what's going on there. Dick is saying that he can't hear me, but can see that I'm speaking. So I'm not sure if anyone else is having that issue. I know we had identified that there was a little bit of an audio glitch a little bit earlier. So if someone else is experiencing that as well, if you could let me know, that would be great. At this time, I don't see any further questions, but maybe that's because nobody can hear me. Hopefully that's not the case. Again, if anyone on the call would want to confirm that you could hear me, that would be greatly appreciated. You can do that in the chat box. But if there are no further questions, thank you, Amber. If there are no further questions, we will go on and conclude our webinar today. Have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.